Recently, it appeared one very unpleasant system for black. It's not really new system, but it's always valid this proverb: everything is new, what is well forgotten. In these two knights defense, with pawn sacrifice, or as I told before, is not really two knights defense, is two knights counter-attack, as used to explain it great Russian inventor of many variations in this opening, Mikhail Chigorin. It's real counter-attack. Bishop b5, c6, take it, and move bishop d3. Move looks to be dubious, and this move is very difficult to explain for beginners because it's a recommendation: don't put bishop in front of your pawns on the second rank, especially in front of d pawn. But in many lines, I must remind, recently, even in some variation of four knights, black plays bishop d6, then rook e8, bishop f8. So this move has its own sense. And the idea of move bishop d3 is, of course, to play knight e4, not to return knight to f3, but to return knight to e4, where it is much more actively placed. Of course, there is another problem that bishop on d3, as I told, is stopping d3 or d4. But white has another idea: to castle and to play rook e1, and then maybe in some variations even bishop f1. So move is quite dangerous, and results are extremely good for white. So black has to be very well prepared for this move. Black has many options here, many normal moves. Even, for example, it's possible to play something like bishop d6, and then to castle, then to play h6, but it allows white to, as I told, to castle and to play rook e1. So black has few principal moves. One of the moves is like h6, knight e4, and now knight d5, castle. Now f5 is not possible because of very unpleasant check, which destroys all the coordination of black pieces. So black plays, for example, g6 slowly, bishop f5 now, knight g3, bishop g7, bishop f1, and castle, c4, knight b6, b4, knight c4, queen b3, bishop e6. Black has marvelous position in the game Sherbakov Hismatulin. So it is this variation is very logical. In the game Navara Beliavsky was played knight d5, white played knight f3. I don't like moves like h4, because white idea is generally to castle as soon as possible, as white has extra pawn, so white has to complete development as fast as is possible. Because these systems are a bit dubious, especially with bishop on d3, and I don't believe that such lines, of course, they are playable, but I don't believe that they are really strong. So white, after knight d5, white plays knight f3, bishop d6, castle, castle, rook e1. And in this game, Navara Beliavsky, it was a critical position. Black has two choices. White attacks on e5. Beliavsky played bishop g4, which looks very logical, but was surprised in this position with very powerful move bishop f5. Idea is to play bishop g4, to unpin, and then to control white squares. Beliavsky played queen f6, bishop g4, pawn takes queen g6, and now knight h4. And now white knight obtained fantastic position on f5, bishop c5, now development, threat is knight e4, knight c3, dc3, bishop b6, and simply b3. So white has extra pawn, black knight is out of the game, and for this reason evaluation is very clear. Black has huge problems, just few moves how the game continued. Rook e8, queen f3, queen e7, bishop a3. Threatening knight d6, rook d8, rook d1. White is has better position, as it's very typical, and extra pawn. After f6, knight d6, rook e7, rook d3, rook d7, rook d1. Black position, we can consider black position as completely lost. So let's return to the critical position after rook e1. And of course, black had to try to develop in different way. Black had to play queen c7. Best move for white is, of course, bishop f1 and then bishop g4, just now. And here maybe to try f5. Of course, there is another option like rook e8, with the idea to play or c5, knight c6, which is typical for two knights counter attack, or knight b7, knight c5. Of course, white has extra pawn on the queen side, but generally when you analyze this position with computer will always prove that white is much better, white has extra pawn, and so on and so on. But as practice shows, on the long run, black has always very good results in such kind of position, because we don't feel the presence of this extra pawn on the queen side, and black initiative after f5 and when they put back knight into the center to c5 or to c6 can be extremely dangerous. It's possible to play differently immediately. f5, h3, bishop f3, queen f3, and e4. Very sharp development, queen d1, rook d8. Knight c3, bishop e5. The same. Computer evaluation is that the white position is better, but practically this position is very dangerous to play, because computers, they have fantastic ability to defend any material advantage, but human being has huge problems, especially with such space advantage and different threats. Different threats like f4, like let's say f4, f3, or knight c6, d4. So generally we can say that this position is very much playable, and the result would be completely unclear. But of course it's necessary to be ready psychologically to play with the pawn down. To play with the pawn down and simply to develop threats. Just in such case, it's possible to succeed. Otherwise, if you will think how to return my pawn back, my precious pawn, so in such cases, result will be very bad.